Lanust is the name of St Just in Cornish, and literally it means, it's like Llan in Welsh, you get lots of Llandovery, Llandudno, so forth, and it means the holy enclosure. So Lanust is the holy enclosure of St Just, who would have been called Uist probably, the J being a bit of an anachronism, I think. And Stations of the Cross Lanust just means we did Stations of the Cross in St Just. Stations of the Cross is a very old, very traditional Catholic ritual where people process around either a church or around a dedicated space, a town or the Colosseum in the case of John Paul II's Stations of the Cross in Rome in 2002. And at each point they're marking a specific point on the road to Calvary. So it starts, station 1 is the arrest of Jesus, station 14 in this case is the burial of Jesus.
The final station, Jesus is claimed and buried by Joseph of Arimathea. The Gospel reading from the Gospel according to St Matthew.
So through the poems, I really tried to channel Fiona's faith. So the impetus for this project comes from passages of the Bible, through Fiona's faith, into poems, and then I took those poems into myself and then tried to use Fiona's faith to try and make something worthy of God. You know, I tried to make something sound as beautiful as I could.
It's that feeling of wanting to bring together something really traditional. So the Cornish language of the Ordinalia is super traditional. It's a very old drama written in Cornish, being appreciated by local people in a place that was created for it. So the Ordinalia took place in the Plain and Gworry in 2021. It also took place in the Plain and Gworry probably in 1421. So there was a sense that you could do a moving version of the Passion of Christ. So the second Ordinalia play is called Passio Christi, and we could do that around St Just. So bringing, rather than everyone going into the church, bringing the church and the world of spirit and the history of the religion out of the church and into the community and into the spaces of the community, which sort of brings everything together. The language, the people, the land, and the religion that informs them.
So we actually had a residency similar to the original St Endelian residency, in exactly the same place actually, where the 4 singers could come together, really try and understand the Cornish language, the phrasing, the pronunciations, with the guidance of Fiona. And we rehearsed it in St Endelian Church and then put on a performance after 5 days of going through the music.
Stations of the Cross. There are 14 stations. The first station, Prima Statio, I gave them all Latin titles just as that little extra bridge between the historic Latin of the liturgy and the modern that we were creating. The first station is set in the Garden of Gethsemane, where Jesus has gone to pray with Peter, James and John, his 3 trusty or not so trusty disciples, because they've fallen asleep, and he's praying for strength for what he knows is going to be an awful time ahead. And sure enough, the soldiers burst in and to arrest him. The second station, Statio, is where Jesus is betrayed by his friend. It is actually the moment of his arrest. But Judas, who's one of the disciples, runs in, kisses Jesus on the face, which is a prearranged sign with the soldiers to say, this is the man you need to arrest. And Jesus feels the intensity of that really profound betrayal and expresses it. The third station, tertia statio, Jesus is taken before the Sanhedrin, the council of religious elders, Jewish religious elders, who really want him to account for himself because he's causing trouble as a religious upstart, and they're having problems with the Romans themselves. They don't need any troublemakers. So they denounce him, and he moves on to the next point in his horrific journey. In the fourth station, Jesus has already been denounced by the Sanhedrin, but now he's denounced in effect by his best friend, Peter, one of his best friends. Jesus has already predicted that Peter will deny knowing Jesus 3 times before the cock crows, and that's what happens. Peter's terrified. The crowd accuse him of being a friend of this traitor, and he denies that he knows him. And then when the cock crows, he remembers what Jesus has said and is overwrought with grief for letting his friend down. And it's one of the moments, the very human moments. So you've in 4 stations, you've already had the betrayal of Judas, the failure of Peter, and the recognition by those people that they've failed spiritually in the moment. But what comes after is different. The 5th station, Interstatio, Jesus is pulled up before Pontius Pilate for the first time and asked to account for himself. He's asked, is he the king of the Jews? And Jesus basically won't answer the question. He's very good at cross-examination. He says, it's you who say it. So he's sent on. Pilate accepts that he can't help this man help himself, so he's condemned. So at the 6th station, Jesus is tortured. He's scourged at the pillar, and the men who are the Roman soldiers who are tormenting him are into humiliating him as well. They dress him in a purple cloak because he's been called the King of the Jews, so they dress him as one, but the crown they give him is of thorns. and they ram it on his head, and he's bleeding and he's suffering, and it's horrible. There's nothing glamorous or romantic or uplifting about or the seventh station is the point where Pilate pronounces the death sentence and Jesus is taken away to be crucified. Octava Statio, the eighth station, Jesus is carrying his cross and he stumbles under it because he's already so bruised and battered. He has no strength, and the soldiers enlist a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, to help him carry it. So a stranger is helping to carry the cross as someone who's about to be crucified on that cross. Nona Statio is the ninth station, and that's where Jesus meets en route to his own death. He meets the daughters of Jerusalem, the women of Jerusalem, who are the women followers of his, who are absolutely distraught and wailing and crying. And he says to them, "Don't weep for me, rather weep for yourselves." And he predicts that times of trial are coming. Decima Statio is the 10th station, and that is where Jesus is crucified. So he doesn't die at this point, he's nailed to the cross, which is raised up, and he's left hanging there in public to die for as long as it takes. Station, the Decima Statio, is where Jesus promises his kingdom to the repentant thief. On either side of Jesus have been crucified two criminals, thieves, and one of them is taking his suffering out on Jesus and accusing him of all sorts. The other one berates his fellow criminal and says that he has faith in Jesus, and Jesus promises that he will be with him in paradise that day with him. The 12th station, duodecima statio, Jesus is dying, he's hanging there dying on the cross, and he sees his mother and his beloved, most beloved disciple standing there watching him. And so he takes it on himself to pledge them to each other. He tells the disciple that his own mother, Mary, will be the disciple's mother, and he tells Mary that she'll be looked after by the beloved disciple. The 13th station, tertia decima statio, is Jesus dies, and everything stops in that moment, and the veil of the temple rips in two, and the land is plunged into darkness for hours. And at the 14th station, Jesus is a corpse, and his corpse is claimed by Joseph of Arimathea, who's a wealthy man who had apparently been a secret disciple of Jesus, but he very openly goes and claims the body and puts it in his own new tomb that had been made in advance for Joseph himself, and then he rolls a stone across it. The story of the Passion is about the ultimate betrayal, but also a huge sacrifice that someone made for something they really believed in, which in this case is the whole of humanity. And I think for that reason it can appeal to anybody.
So my hopes for the future of this project is longevity and legacy, actually. I think I love the idea of this being a traditional thing we do in St Just every year. I also like the concept of it being, because it's scored music, it could actually be taken on by anybody. It'd be really interesting to hear it sung with classical singers. It'd be interesting for it to be taken around to the different Celtic nations, for example, because there's a lot of origin roots in the language there. I would really, really like to take it to Rome, having sat in all the basilicas there, listening to the beautiful acoustics and imagining this music in my head. I'd really like to hear that brought into fruition.